So as far as the rest of the quarterbacks go, we don't have anyone else that is a for sure starter. But we do have several guys that were signed and look like they could be competing. So I'm going to list off a few names for you here, Matt. And you
super flex notable guys, right? I mean, like, that's
yes,
it.
Exactly. These are guys that could be your third quarterback at some point. But we don't even know for sure if they're getting the job, so we'll have to see. So you tell me which one you like the most to win their job, which ones you don't want to touch, whatever. So here's the names here. Taylor Heinicke, now in Atlanta with Desmond Ridder. Jacoby Brissett, now in Washington with Sam Howell. We have Baker Mayfield, now in Tampa Bay with Kyle Trask. And then we have Gardner Minshew, who at the moment is alone in Indianapolis, but many thought that they might sign a free agent. Lamar Jackson is still an outside possibility for them. But then there's also rumor with them picking at 4 that they could potentially be taking the third or fourth quarterback off the board as well. So we'll list him for now as well. Of all of those names, is there one that stands out like, yeah, that guy's probably going to be the starter, or I wouldn't touch that guy with a 10-foot pole. I'm selling him as fast as I can.
I mean, I think the guy that stands out to me the most is probably Jacoby Brissett. I think he did a reasonably good job last year. I think he's right now better than a Sam Howell, and I think they're currently picking like 16th in the first round. So who knows if there's anyone that they're going to be able to draft there way down there in the middle of the round that would be able to come in and unseat them. I mean, obviously anything could happen on draft day, and they could be one of these surprise teams that moves up. You really never know if they fall in love with somebody. But for me, that's the guy that kind of sticks out as the steady Eddie guy that is just going to beat out a second year guy. And unless there's some crazy jump up in the draft, he's going to be able to beat out the rookie as well that they bring in. So I really do think he's the guy. How about you? Do you got any? I mean, Baker obviously is.
Baker's the one that I was going to select as the one I thought had the best shot.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to win the job as well. So I feel he's going to be able to beat out Trask, because Trask is just
trash.
He's just he was an unknown. I mean, we don't even know what he is really. I didn't particularly like him coming out. So I think Baker showed last year that he is a capable NFL quarterback. I never really thought he wasn't. It just didn't work out in Cleveland. He played through injury his whole entire last year there, and kind of rode that injury kind of out of town. He rode himself out of a job, unfortunately, by playing through that injury. So Baker at Tampa Bay, I think that's a nice fit. And I don't know how to feel about the assets there if he wins that game. How do you see that situation?
Yeah, I think this is a no-win situation for the assets in Tampa Bay. I think you would, in some senses, I do think Baker's the better quarterback, and he does have that moxie that guys, he can be polarizing. Guys either really like him or they really don't. But I think he has a better chance to rally that locker room better than a Kyle Trask would. But sometimes you get blessed by these big-armed young quarterbacks that just don't care and they just chuck it, because you're not starting Trask, but you might be starting Evans or Godwin, and if he's just going to chuck it downfield to them, yeah, half the time it might be an interception, but half the time it might be a big play too. So I think you can go 6 one way, half a dozen the other. I don't think it's a great situation. Either way, it's a significant downgrade from what they had last year in Tom Brady. So I think all of those assets are, Mike Evans at this point, I think we can kiss his 1,000-yard consecutive seasons goodbye probably. Chris Godwin, we'll see. He's the younger of the two players and is the more talented probably at this point in his career. So he might be fine still, but I still wouldn't expect high-end numbers. I do really quickly want to go back to Washington because you mentioned them. Brissett or Howell. I actually really like Howell. I was pre-draft. He was my favorite quarterback. Now, after the draft was over, obviously he gets 5th round draft capital. I had to move him down, but I still only had him as my second think a second or third guy behind, let's see, I had Pickett, Willis, and then him. So he was my third guy post-draft. I always liked what he did. I thought he had quite a bit of juice, guy that makes plays. And in his limited time, it wasn't a lot, but in his limited time at the end of the season last year, he showed quite a bit. So the good news for Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, those guys is of all of these situations, whichever quarterback ends up winning the job, I think is the best of this entire group. Like, I think Sam Howell could get the job done, but if Brissett wins it, we saw what he did with Amari Cooper last year. He kept him fantasy relevant all year, and he finished as a wide receiver 1. So, obviously, Watson was there for part of that, but he kept him very, very relevant. So, I think he could do the same thing to the major assets that are part of the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I kind of did gloss over that pretty quickly, but that for those assets, I think I agree. I agree. Sam Howell is, to me, I think we kind of even compared him to a Baker Mayfield type
they look alike.
Where, he's they do look alike, and even in body style, all that kind of stuff, they're very similar. So I think he can keep that. He could keep that offense going and fantasy relevant. But personally, I think Brissett's he's a 30-year-old guy. He's been around the block. Yeah. I think he's probably going to be the guy that wins, unless it's super close. You know what I mean? If it's a super close, tight race, and Howell has taken a pretty big jump, he could win that job just based off the fact that he has a future there. Sure. You know what I mean? Like more than a couple of years type of future. So that one, I guess, that is the only way I see that kind of tilting towards Howell, is if it's close enough, and he's taking a kind of a big jump this year. So it's interesting. These are going to be cool, like fun camp battles, like you said. But obviously Minshew, we know what Minshew is. I would imagine they're going to make some sort of move there. So while it's a nice story, I think he went to a place where he thought, hey, I've got a shot here at least. You know what I mean? To start. That's probably why he went to Indy. It's probably not more than a bridge situation, if anything. You know what I mean? If they draft a guy, maybe Minshew's better than him for the first 4 or 5 games.
Right.
But it's going to be one of those things where he gets replaced, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And as far as Heinicke goes, the whole Atlanta situation just strikes me as we're punting for 2024. We want Caleb Williams or Drake May. So I think Desmond Ridder probably wins that job. He looked decent at the end of he had a couple really rough games to start, but then his last 2 were actually pretty solid. So I think he did enough there that they're just kind of going to ride that out and see how it goes, unless they're also in a position I think they're right after the Raiders. So one of those guys could fall and they could end up, drafting an Anthony Richardson or somebody like that as well. So I don't think that's a done deal, but I think Heinicke is either the second or the third string. So at this point, great backup to help you win 3 or 4 games if you need him to. But other than that, that's all that is there. So
I feel like Heinicke, if he's playing, it's real bad news for Atlanta. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. So,
exactly.